Today on In the Squadron, Sloth, Warren, and myself, we got to sit down with Lieutenant General retired Daniel Fig Leaf. He used to be the Vice Commander of U.S. Space Command and the Deputy Commander of U.S. Pacific Command. Let's join the conversation. That's good. So going back to some of your experiences, I know the position that you ended up filling at OIF ended up being codified as the JACCE. So what big experiences did you take away from trying to bring in, hey, this is the airman's perspective in that position, into a joint fight?
Well, let me start first of all with how I got there.
Okay. I love war stories, so that's why we're here.
Well, I was in the Pentagon, so it was war of a different kind. In the Pentagon on September 11th, and I'd been in the Pentagon in the same job as the Director of Operational Requirements for the Air Force for 3 years as we approached OIF. And General Mosley, who was the 9th Air Force Commander, CENTAF, and the Air Component Commander for OIF, called me up in an unexpected phone call and said, Fig, I need you to go be my guy with the Army during what we think is going to be an invasion. And I really did say, hey, I'll be a human shield. I'll be a POW. Just get me out of the Pentagon. So he did. But, I mean, my marching orders were that non-specific. I need you to ensure that General Dave McKiernan, the Land Component Commander, and I are communicating in sync, reduce the friction between the components. And I knew the Army because I'd taught at the CGSC, I'd been at FAC-ALO, I had been the Deputy J3 in U.S. Forces Korea, which is, there's a lot more Army than anything else in that job. So he said, pick the people you need and go do it. As I picked the people I needed, I went across domains. Okay, I picked a space guy that worked for me, brilliant young major at the time. I picked a Huey pilot from the Air Force, not because of his domain, but because of his ability to make organizations work better. He'd been an ops group deputy at Langley. I picked an A-10 guy. I picked a lot. I covered the domains, the subdomains, if you will, of air and space, and the sub-disciplines of air power. And we got about 12 people. I think we added 4 more, including coalition people, when we got there. And the whole purpose of having the ACE, now JACE, there was to eliminate friction and misunderstanding. I didn't have authorities per se. I was just there to pick up the phone and call somebody at PSAB in the air component and say, dudes, here's what the land component thinks they're going to do, be ready for it, or tell them not to, tell them that won't work, kind of thing. Or to raise my hand in meetings and say, first of all, you're wrong, and secondly, that's a dumb idea. Or, and it wasn't always that, here's how we can help from the air component. I'll give a specific example that I think's important. 2 days before the invasion, General McKiernan, who I have tremendous respect for, he's a really fine combat leader, brought in all of his subordinate commanders, the division commanders, 5th Corps commander, and key leaders from the staff. And we went into a warehouse in Kuwait that had a huge sand table depicting all of Iraq with, with the elevation features and all that. First thing that dawned on me was, that's a pretty big country compared to where we've been fighting. It's about the size of California, I think. Compared to my most recent combat experience in Serbia. It's a big country. Size matters. And I had been in this warehouse before, so I had thought about that. And thus I had, I'll say 3, it might have been 5 quarters in my pocket. Why did I have it? Because I knew the tendency of the Army, and really of a lot of military people, to be overly affectionate to RPA provided intel, imagery, predator porn, if you will. And they love it, and they overvalue it, and they over expect goodness from it. So one of the division commanders, I won't name because I don't remember which one, frankly, was walking through exactly what the Umpty-Ump division would be doing, and I'm still lieutenant, so I'm doing whatever. It was good, it was professional, but he began talking about what he would get from UAV video. And it was ridiculous expectations, ridiculous. So I stood up and walked out and said, hey, name. One of the great things of the ace role was I was a 2-star. Everybody except McKiernan and the corps commander were 2-stars, so I was truly a peer, and that matters. You can't send a major to be a Jace to a 2-star commander.
It just doesn't culturally work.
It doesn't work with anybody. You know, you got to be a peer. So I walked out and said, hey, that's all very interesting. And I took out however many quarters I had. I think it was 3 Predators that we had at the outset. It might have been 5. And flipped these out on this huge sand table. Everybody, you know, what's that about? I said, that's your Predator coverage at the most. That's it. All of them are airborne, and all of them are transmitting down. That's all you've got in these quarters on this huge sand table.
Visual.
Nice.
And that really, that was kind of my job in terms of influencing them. And there was another job that we had in terms of informing them and keeping them apprised of where we were in our creating our effects. And again, I have tremendous respect for David McKiernan. Our interaction would always start with, Fig, how's the Air Force doing? And he meant the Joint Air Power Team, but he was, Fig, how's the Air Force doing? First day or two, my answer was fine, and that wasn't sufficient. And he pressed me for a little more information, but he was not a micromanager, and he didn't want to, he just wanted a sense of the effects that air power was having, and we kind of struggled with how do we convey that without getting into the, we flew 623 sorties to this area and 23, 28%, whatever. You know. So we didn't want to be too macro or too micro. And if you haven't been in combat yet, eSchool listeners, readers, watchers, whatever, you get pretty busy.
Yeah,
right?
you do.
It's kind of busy and time's very precious. So the question was, how do you convey the effects in a meaningful way that doesn't waste his time or our time gathering data, et cetera? And I had a very smart Air Force major fighter pilot. I realize that's contradictory to most of you. He was a smart fighter pilot, kind of a geek. And we had a good relationship with, I think the name of NGA at the time was NEMA, I think.
Okay.
But anyway, the geospatial intelligence folks. And what we wound up doing was creating a very simple, technically, solution where using an Excel spreadsheet of the day's BDA and the collected BDA, we would put dots on a Falcon view map that were different colors for whether the mission was effective, partially effective, aborted, weather canceled. And that map was populated, and you could, of course, zoom out and get a pretty granular look at it. And if you wanted, if you had nothing better to do, you could put a cursor on the dot and go, oh, that foreship canceled. Well, that's interesting. Or they blew the ever-living crap out of the whatever Republican Guards. But it gave a graphic picture. You know, General McKiernan wanted to know, hey, if we prepped the battlefield, what kind of effect have we had on the name of Iraqi unit or choke point or whatever. And with that, he could very easily get just enough news he could use. So that, that's where we informed and be realistic about what you're going to get from UAVs is where we influenced. And I have another gun, so when I look at my watch, I realize it's getting.
It's all right. We've been keeping track too.
Okay.
Maybe next interview I'll have to put a clock on the wall so it helps a little bit. Guys, do you have any